getting DRE approval if you're listing a property type that requires DRE approval, which, as I mentioned before, if it's all residential, it's a building with 5 or more units. If it's a mixed-use building, it's a building of 5 or more units, of which at least 1 is residential. So if you're doing a 4-unit building or a 3-unit building or a 2-unit building, you can skip step 1. You don't need DRE approval. If you're in this category where you do need it, you're not allowed to advertise the property or to take offers or obviously to close anything until the DRE process is run its course. You have to hold everything until you get the DRE approval. Once you have the DRE approval, you need to use the documentation that the DRE approved. Among those documents that we send into the DRE are certain disclosures and certain and a purchase contract form. Once the DRE approves that, you need to use it. You can't get contract A approved and then turn around and use the local association of realtors contract for your actual deals. So you go through this process. I just put in a cost item here. It's roughly $20,000, including attorney's fees to get the DRE approval. By the way, if you're doing a small building, let's say a 2, 3, or 4-unit building that doesn't require DRE approval, then the cost is about $2,000. Step 2 is planning the financing. So in this call and in the LA market, in this presentation and the LA market in general, we're really only talking about fractional loans. The community doesn't seem to be interested in what we call group loan TICs, which is where everyone's on the same loan. We still see quite a bit of group loan TIC activity in Northern California for people who want 30-year fixed rate mortgages. So they still do group loans, which is where everybody's on the same loan and the loan payments are part of the dues. The reason I added this item here is because the decision of fractional loan versus group loan needs to be made before you go on the market, because A, it affects the TIC agreement preparation, and B, it's a critical thing to be able to tell buyers, because if it's a group loan situation that you want to do, then you're going to have certain buyers who don't want that because they want their own loan. If it's a fractional loan situation, you might have certain buyers who don't want that because they want 30-year fixed. So it's important to decide up front what the financing is going to look like. And I've got some other details here that aren't directly relevant. The main thing is just deciding what type of financing the TIC is going to involve. Oops, why isn't it moving? There we go. Step 3, planning the closing. So this touches on the answer I was just giving to one of the questions, which is how many units are going to close at once. So standard approach for LA seems to be we do them one at a time, which is called serial closing. But as I mentioned in response to the question, the seller could decide that they want to close all of them at once, or that they want to close 2 out of 4 or 3 out of 8 or whatever. But you need to know this because it's a disclosure issue that you need to tell buyers and their agents. And it also will impact what you put in the purchase contract, because if you're going to make the buyer wait until there's 2 other buyers, then that's got to be in the purchase contract. The issue of serial versus simultaneous closing is related to financing. I'm not going to, I more or less explained how in the previous answer, so I won't touch on that again. Step 4, getting a TIC agreement. So you might say, if you have a small building and you don't need to go to DRE, you might say, well, why get a TIC agreement? Why not just go out on the market, let the buyers do their own agreement? And the reason is that if you don't have a TIC agreement, it means that the only kind of purchase offer you're going to be able to accept is an offer on the whole building. Meaning, for example, if you have a 4-unit building, the 4 buyers need to get together in a room and write one single offer to you. That's not practical from a marketing standpoint. What the TIC agreement allows you to do is accept separate offers on separate contract forms. Typically what this is with the large buildings that get DRE approval, we get the contract form approved by DRE, as I already mentioned. With small buildings, what is typically done is you use the local association of realtors form with a TIC addendum, which I don't know that the LA Association has yet, but we provide it free of charge. Use that with your standard form contract. So Your standard form contract is going to say the buyer is making an offer on 25% of the building. It's not going to say anything about what unit that they're going to live in. And then the TIC addendum fills in the blank and cross-references to the TIC agreement. And that's what ties the whole thing together. So it's clear what rights and obligations the buyer is buying. As I mentioned before, about $2,100 for the cost of the pre-sale TIC agreement for small buildings. So when you get past those first few steps, getting the DRE approval if you need it, planning out the financing and the closing, and getting the TIC agreement, now you're ready to go on the market. You have the issue of managing your offers. The most important thing about managing offers is the one I just explained about the contracts. So if you get an offer that, let's say the building is 245, 247, and 249 Sunset Boulevard, and you get an offer from a buyer that says, I am offering $500,000 to buy 245 Sunset Boulevard. Can you accept that offer? Should you accept that offer? Let's assume that the price is attractive. Well, the reason you shouldn't accept that offer is because it is inaccurate and misleading, because you can't sell that buyer that unit. You can only sell that buyer an interest in the whole building. And if you accept that offer, it appears that you are agreeing to sell that buyer that unit. And that not only is a violation of law, but it also is very misleading to the buyer, who may come back 6 months later and say, hey, wait a minute, I thought you subdivided this building and were selling me just that unit. Now I find out I got this percentage. I don't want a percentage. And you say, well, I did explain it to you. And the buyer says, well, look at this contract. You can see right here, it says you agreed to sell me this unit. That's not a case that anyone wants to defend. So for that reason, it's really important that you identify the property correctly in the contract. And if you get one of these offers that is incorrectly written, you ask the buyer's agent to rewrite it. And as I mentioned, you would use the TIC addendum to specify which particular unit the buyer is going to have the right to occupy. Notice I did not say which particular unit the buyer is buying. It's which particular unit the buyer is going to have the right to occupy. So the next step, managing the closing. Now, you might say, well, why am I managing the closing? I'm just the real estate agent, or I'm just the seller. Why isn't the title company or the escrow office managing the closing? And the answer is, in a perfect world, they would know how to do that and be able to do that correctly. But in our world, especially in Los Angeles, there's a high probability that the escrow agent will not know how to do a TIC unless you go to one of a few of them that have some experience. So it may fall to you as the seller or the listing agent to make sure that that the closing is being properly handled, because otherwise the escrow agent's gonna get it wrong. So with regard to the TIC agreement, it's critical that it be signed by the buyer, and it's critical that it have its exhibits attached. Specifically, it's gonna have a map showing where these spaces are, where each unit is in the building, where the parking spaces are, where the storage spaces are, and so on, and perhaps some other exhibits. And it's very common for people to somehow lose the exhibits. So you want to make sure that the TIC agreement is signed with the exhibits attached. There is another document that I haven't discussed in this speech yet, which is the declaration or memorandum of agreement, depending on the size of the building. We use different forms. And that is like a marker in the public records saying that a TIC agreement exists. It cannot say who gets what unit for all the reasons that I've mentioned earlier, but it does provide constructive notice to the world that there is a TIC agreement. And the purpose of that is that you don't want a creditor or a trustee in bankruptcy or someone who inherits an interest to be able to claim ignorance. And having a marker on the record of the existence of a TIC agreement puts all those people on notice that they need to find out what's in this agreement. And if they fail to do so, it's at their peril. So it's a very important form of protection for the group to have this type of document recorded. And with respect to this step 6, what's important is for you, if you're managing the closing, is this document in escrow? Has it been already recorded because there's been a previous close? Or if not, is it being signed by the buyer and the seller, and is the title company or escrow office going to record it? The deeds. I've mentioned a bunch of times that it's really important that they not show unit numbers or addresses. Everyone involved in these transactions should know that, but you would be surprised how often this is missed, and we end up seeing a deed that says the buyer is getting unit 245. So it's important to take a look at these and make sure that they're not improper, because there's a lot at stake. Because if you're the agent or the seller and you create an illegal subdivision by recording a deed, then you face civil and criminal penalties as well as possible loss of your license. You want to also make sure that the deed identifies the correct percentage that the buyer is getting. This is not a big or common problem, but we have run into it where there's a disconnect between what the TIC agreement says is the buyer's percentage and what the deed says. So making sure that the deed accurately reflects the percentage is important. So that's the seller side. Should we keep going, or are we at the end of our time?
Please keep going.
Okay, so this last part is really about buyers and making sure that they understand what they're getting into and the potential risks. If you're the listing agent, or if you're, maybe less so if you're the seller, but primarily if you're the listing agent, you're going to run into a lot of buyers and a lot of buyers agents who just have no idea what this is. And you may want a few bullet points to at least give them some idea of what are the unique risks associated with TICs as compared to, say, a condo. So I think risk number one is the lending. So as I mentioned before, there's only 2 lenders right now in Southern California offering fractional loans. We don't know what the future holds. The trajectory seems positive because we're seeing more and more TIC volume and a lot of lender interest, interest on the part of new lenders in offering this product. So we think in the future there will be more, not less lenders, but we don't know. So because of that, it is possible that TIC loans, when these buyers go to refinance or when they sell, might be hard to get or expensive, or down payment requirements might be greater. And the TIC pricing needs to reflect the existence of this risk. Risk number 2 is the incomplete TIC agreement. So it can be incomplete because owners haven't signed. It can be incomplete because exhibits are missing. I put this risk quite high up here because the TIC agreement is such an important element of making a TIC work. And the issue of unsigned or partially signed agreements or missing exhibits is astonishingly common. I mean, I would go as far as to say that, we see when people come back to us for resales, I would say a good 40, maybe even 50% of every single TIC agreement we see is only partially signed, which is unbelievable. But it's just because people don't take it seriously, and so they don't sign. So really important that these buyers understand that not just does a TIC need to be complete when they're closing, but over time, as people resell, each time there's a new person, they need to sign a complete agreement. Risk number 3, this is one we haven't talked about at all yet. It's not a risk necessarily specific to TICs because condominiums also have budgeting and dues to collect, but I think we see a little bit more sloppiness or lack of formality in TICs, primarily because the groups tend to be smaller. A lot of TICs are 2, 3, 4, 5 unit buildings. There are condos that are 2, 3, 4, 5 units, but they're relatively rare. And as the buildings get get smaller, whether they're TICs or condos, the groups tend to get more informal and sloppy. And that's not necessarily a fatal problem. It's just a risk, because the less formality and the more sloppiness there is in the operational aspect of the group, the more potential there is for a problem with a default or a non-payment that you then can't collect because you don't have a good paper trail or a real budget or a clear understanding of what the the dues were even supposed to be or when they were due and so forth. So what I always tell buyers about this is if you and everyone else in the group is totally comfortable with being informal and you're all willing to take the risk that it might cause problems down the line, go for it. But if you want my recommendation, I say do it formally. Have a budget, collect the dues, have them all, have the dues due on a particular date, act if somebody hasn't paid their dues, and so on. Now, a particular issue I want to shine a light on with regard to sloppy budgeting is property tax. As I mentioned before, property tax is a group obligation in a TIC. People need to be paying their property tax as part of their dues, as far as I'm concerned. I think it's critical, again, to manage risk. If you have a situation where the group is waiting till the property tax bill comes and then trying to collect it from all of the owners, you have a potential powder keg. Maybe it'll work the first 4 or 5 times. Maybe it won't. Maybe it'll stop working the 6th time or the 5th time or whatever, or somebody will sell without paying their property tax or whatever. All those problems disappear if you just include the property tax in the budget and you collect it every month as part of the dues. Reserves, again, sloppiness in smaller groups, both TICs and condos, is often reflected in the lack of repair and replacement reserves. If you're comfortable with the risk that some owner won't have the money to pay for the roof when it's time to replace the roof, go for it. If you're comfortable with the fact that somebody who lived in the building for 15 years and then sold right before the roof needed to be replaced has never contributed anything to the cost of the roof and the buyer's going to have to pay the entire share, go for it. But I don't think that's the way to run a group. And so I strongly encourage my groups to include reserves in their budget so that when it comes time to replace the roof, there's money in the bank to do it. So solution here, if you're a buyer, take a look at the TIC budget. If there isn't one, then think twice about buying. Take a look at the bank statements. If the association isn't collecting dues every month that include the property tax, maybe think twice about buying it. Find out who's actually managing, who's collecting the dues and paying the bills. If there isn't anyone doing that, maybe think about not buying this one. Review the minutes. Find out what the group is talking about. If there aren't any minutes, what does that mean? Are they not meeting? Are they doing everything by email? All those things are risk factors that the buyer should consider in their buying decision. So that's it. There's a list of some of the things we do. And if there are any other questions, I'm happy to address them.
I saw that there were some questions in the chat. Question from Tim: what happens if all owners decide to demolish, rebuild, or redevelop the property?
I always like to say that if all owners decide anything, they should do it.
Okay. Another question from Bill: can the seller offer or designate a specific unit for a certain interest percentage, even though that unit will not be specified on the grant deed?
Yes, in fact, they have to do that.
You addressed this earlier. California just passed a minimum 25% rentals for all association, so that wouldn't apply here?
No, not it doesn't apply to TICs because they're not subdivisions.
Can a TIC agreement specify 55-year-old and or older owners?
That's a good question, and I'm not sure that I know the answer to it. Yeah, I'm going to beg that one off. I don't know.
Okay. And the final one I see in the chat, can you please give a 1-minute elevator pitch when a buyer says, what is this TIC thing and how does it work?
Sure. What I like to tell buyers is that a TIC is a way that people create something that looks and acts a lot like a condo, but is different. And the way that they do that, the reason they can do that is because California law allows the creation of TICs for buildings and in places where condos can't be created. TICs do involve some risks that condos don't, but I think if you really like the building and the price is attractive and you're willing to take the time to educate yourself about the risks of TICs, it's a perfectly safe thing to buy. That was less than a minute.
That was less than a minute. Very good. Are there any other questions?
I have a question. From start to fin, from the time I purchase a 4-unit or less building, a 4-unit building, how much and how long will it take before I can start selling the individual? I know I'm using the wrong words. Selling interests in the building. So you said it takes 6 months to get through DRE. So is that about the length of time? And then with legal fees and all the fees and the $2,100 to DRE, how much total is it going to cost me?
Okay, so I'm going to answer in two parts. The first part is for the 2 to 4 unit buildings, and the second part is the 5 buildings and large, 5 units and larger. So for 2 to 4 units, the total cost is $2,100, and it takes about a week. For the buildings of 5 or more units, the total cost is around $20,000, and it takes about 6 months.
And that includes legal fees, the $20,000?
Yes. But in the first case, the $2,100 is only legal fees because there isn't any other costs. In the second case, the $20,000 includes the legal fees, which are $4,500.
It seems like I would need a lot more consultation than $4,500 is going to buy. So, I mean, how available are you? And do you just bill by the hour when I call you up with a stupid question?
That's an interesting question. So with let's take, I'm going to put it in the exact context that you gave it to me, which is a larger, so you're doing a big building.
Well,
so
I'm probably,
clients,
I'm going to start with a smaller building. I'm probably going to do this and go buy a 4-unit building and try it. So I'm talking 4 units, but answer for both because I'm sure other people have the same question. Okay.
Sure.
Oh, sure.
So with the small buildings, there's no consultation time built into the $2,100 fee. So what we're doing is we're doing a short call with you. Typically, it takes 10 to 15 minutes to gather the information about the physical characteristics of the building, because that's what we need to do the agreement. It's not intended to be sort of an educational call. So the answer to your question for the small buildings would be more or less exactly what you suspected when you asked the question, which is if you had other things to ask me about that you didn't understand or problems that were coming up or whatever, we would just schedule an hourly consultation. The hourly rate is different depending on which attorney, but assuming it's me, it's $590 an hour, and I charge in 6-minute intervals. You could talk for as long as you want. The answer for the big buildings is much more fluid because that $4,500 is obviously a lot of money. So there we're assuming we're going to get repeated contacts from the owner over the course of 6 to 8 months, and if it's within reason, we don't charge anything for that. But if it becomes a burden, if it's like the person is contacting me every day or they want to talk for an hour, then I will suggest a paid consultation.
Okay, so literally up and running in a week on a 4-unit building?
Yeah, because I mean, we're gonna speak for 10 to 15 minutes, and then I'm going to do the agreement usually in the next few days, unless it's super busy. Then it might take 6 or 7 days.
So I close today, I could start selling the shares next week.
Yes, I mean, we haven't talked about the occupancy status of the building, but let's assume it's vacant.
Assuming it's vacant.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
If you're going to flip it that fast, then it's really important to think about the financing, right? For all the reasons that I spoke about in connection with Will's building. Like,
Yeah.
You don't want to pay for a super expensive loan that you're going to pay off in 90 days.
Now, my first one I would do with cash. I'm going to sell one building and buy another one, and just do it cash. And I don't really owe anything on that building, so I'll just. Oh, how is it going to affect? Is it going to affect my 1031? so I sell one building. I mean, specifically, I have a little 4-unit, all 1-bedroom thing in San Bernardino. I don't really make much money with it. It's kind of a dog. So I'm going to sell it and then buy something with it. And of course, I'll do a 1031. And of course, I did a 1031 into it. So does it qualifies for a 1031 if I just go buy the other building? How does that work?
The issue is going to be the hold time on the upleg, right? So the building that you buy, at least in the hypothetical that we've been discussing, you're not thinking of owning it for very long. And we also, I think, hypothesized that it was going to be vacant. So those are two potential challenges in an audit. A, you never rented out the building that you acquired, and B, you only held it for, say, 3 months or something. So my concern in that situation would be that if your exchange was audited, that it could be disallowed because of one or both of those reasons. So I'm not a tax lawyer, but those are the two things that I would definitely explore with whoever does your tax planning. I'm not saying that you would lose in the audit, but there's definitely some risk factors. And as you may know, with these 1031 audits, the federal government is not particularly aggressive, but California, FTB, is extremely aggressive, and they're smart. So if you get a state audit on a tax-deferred exchange and it's not perfect, you're going to have a fight on your hands.
So would you recommend that, I mean, it's any investment grade asset on a 1031. I don't know if it needs to necessarily make any money because vacant land will also qualify. It just has to be any investment grade asset. But the time frame I'm not sure about. So do you think to be safe, we should keep it for 6 months, or you don't know and we're just gambling?
I think it would be better to ask a tax lawyer or a tax advisor than me, because I don't sell tax advice. I don't even prepare my own taxes.
Yeah, it's a bear. Well, this has been awesome, man. And this is, I couldn't thank you enough. And thank you, Will, for doing this. This is good. There's a lot of webinars out there, but every now and then you find a jewel, and this is a good one.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah.
You can see that it's gotten dark here behind me.
Yeah,
wow.
it's getting late. It's getting late in France, I know.
It's actually, Spain. I'm in the Canary Islands.
Oh, in Spain, sorry.
Oh, the Canary
That's why it was darker later.
Ah.
I thought it was lighter later, I noticed.
That's why the beach has been in the background here, but now it's dark.
Nice. Are there any final questions for Andy while we still have him, before he goes to sleep?
Or to dinner.
Or dinner, exactly. It's Spain, right? Andy, I'm going to, ask if you don't mind sharing the PowerPoint with us, if that's allowed, because I'm sure people will be
email or something.
that. I'm sorry.
Send it by email.
Yes, send that to us by email, and that way we have it. And if people want it, they can contact us. I just want to clarify. I do not own that 8-unit building in OSL. I know we've used that as an example, but I am part of the ownership group, so I do know some of the stuff. I do know that we bought it with the loan that does allow for, as the way you put it, partial lease, exactly. So as we sell off each individual unit, we can pay back, fractionally the loan. The other thing I want to just say is that, this group, our speaker series for the multifamily investor group, we just hit, while we were on this call, 1,000 members.
Awesome.
And, it's a major milestone for us. We've been doing this for 3 years. As hopefully you can see, we try to get awesome speakers speaking at the best stuff. So I really want to thank Andy so much for taking the time from the Canary Islands to join us. And, Anthony, do you want to say any final words?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank everyone for joining us. And if you do want to see this session, it will be on our YouTube page later today. We broke it up into 2 sections. So the first section with Andy is all about what TICs are and how they work. And the second section is how to list them. So there'll be 2 separate videos. If you are watching this, make sure you if you watch this video, make sure you check our first video out on more information about TIC. So there's 2 videos on our YouTube channel. And then join us next week. It's an important election, and it's an important election for property owners. So we are going to be talking about 2 different, actually 3 different propositions coming up on the ballot. In detail, we have a government affairs rep from California Association of Realtors who has great relationships with our legislators. So it would be a great time to ask questions and answers on all the different bills and things that are happening that are going to be affecting property owners. And we'll specifically focus in on the propositions that'll be up for you to vote on. So that's going to be next Wednesday at 4:30. But yeah, again, thank you guys so much. Stay tuned, subscribe to our channel so you don't miss anything out. If you'd like to stay on for a few more minutes, we're going to have Marty and Natalie. There are a couple lenders just talking about where rates are right now for the general market right now, and any questions you might have for them. Stay tuned. And then Will has us set up for in 2 weeks for a lender specifically talking about TICs. So I'm going to stop this recording, but feel free to stay on and
I just
listen
want
to. Yeah.
I just want to add that I did put Andy's contact information in the chat. You can always go to him at andysirkin.com.